Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and I am hanging out with Grant Ellis today. And we're running a little bit late because we were just shooting the breeze beforehand. And apparently we could probably just keep talking and talking and talking forever here. But that you guys are waiting, so we needed to get this thing going. I hope everyone had a good holiday if you celebrate Thanksgiving in the States, or just had an awesome Thursday, whichever the case may be. So I will let you introduce yourself and the things that you got going on, because you do have some really cool and interesting things.
All right. My name is Grant Ellis. I am an independent game author who is working on a series of 3 modules that will be released at the end of Q1 next year. I am a dungeon master on the web-based series Encounter Roleplay, where I run all original content for a cast from around the world. I am the head writer of the comic Commander Kaiju, illustrated by Sam Ellis, who is the lead character designer on Archer and has done a lot of work with Adventure Time. And I'm happy to be here. I run a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, so thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming on. Random questions are already starting to pop into the chat. Hey guys, if you do actually have a question, put the word question before it, so this way we can pick them out easily. Otherwise, I may ignore them or not see them, either way. But it just makes it so much easier if you put that word question in front. So, well, speaking of Thanksgiving, how was yours?
It was amazing. I ate so much wonderful food, and the best part about it was just how nice the house smelled most of the day. I spent a lot of it playing with my kids. They were just hanging out with me. They liked having Dad being home from work, so we played a lot of Xbox One. We played a lot of Castle Crashers, which is my 5-year-old's favorite game. And at the end of the night, we ended it with an impromptu live stream where we had Power Score RPG, who you had on the show on Wednesday, I believe, from Terminally Nerdy. We just ran an improv, zero prep D&D session. We talked about all the published modules. You know, Sean has a great mind for the industry and role-playing games. And Clay is just hilarious and a blast and has such an enthusiasm for gaming that we couldn't help but play some Dungeons and Dragons for a small crowd. Clay's wife had work, so he was a little bummed out. She had to do the whole Black Friday rush. But we enjoyed it. We enjoyed it.
I didn't have anything cool and nerdy. It was just family time. You know, me and Ted are related, so we get to hang out. And my kids are at an age where they do not really want to talk to me that much. But just the girl. The boy, he's about to turn 17 next week, and he's actually a gamer. So,
what are his favorite games?
Right now he's only really playing He's played D&D and Mutants and Masterminds. So he's been playing with us for the last couple years.
What's a game you want to introduce him to? When are you going to pull out the Old Testament of Nerdarchy and drop it on him? That's what I want to know.
You know, I haven't even really considered that. I mean, he's talked about wanting to play Mutants and Masterminds again. He would probably really enjoy Marvel Phase Rip as well. And we're actually playing that Monday nights. Professor Bell from Comic Book University comes in and runs a game for us. But what? Oh, wait a minute. You know what? No, that's not true. He's played Cypher System. Oh my God, I'm a horrible parent. I don't even know what games he's played, and I played in them. We played a Shadowrun Cypher System game. We also play Star Wars, the new one, FFG. And I feel like we did 4th edition Gamma World too.
Sweet. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Tries before you took though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's sort of a with my kids, they just saw all these cool minis and they were like, we want to play with this. And I had bought a bunch of Dwarven Forge. Now my kids are 5 and 6 years old, so they're a little young, but they're all about Dungeons and Dragons and playing with the minis and rolling dice. They don't have too much mechanics yet, but it's definitely fun to have a family that games together.
Yeah, you know, I tried actually running the family game with my daughter and my wife, and they're good sports, and they gave it a try. More so my wife than my daughter, but I was like, she was in the Monster High at the time, so I'm like, all right, we can do a shifter bar to make this like Faye pop star. But the only thing she latched onto was when I gave her the spell cards, was playing them like they were Pokemon cards, and she's never played Pokemon. So
Yeah, that's a now my wife is a pretty cutthroat gamer, and she's an illustrator by trade. She's actually a scientist by trade, but she's only ever made money doing illustration. But
That is
she's
the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
yeah, and her parents didn't want her to go to art school. They said, no, you have to study science. So she got a degree, couldn't get a job as a scientist. So her first job was illustrating a Star Wars comic. But she's a cutthroat role player, and she's one of those very protective of any hirelings or followers, and will put the party in the worst position to protect her little friends. But I like that. I like that about her. She kind of came out of her shell as a role player when someone placed a helm of change alignment on her, and she was. She said, "I don't know how to play a lawful evil character." I said, "Well, you're essentially chaotic good, anyways. So just think of any decision that you would make, and then flip it 180. Just behave the opposite. So that's how you know how to run your character." And it was great. Her character became one of the most popular ones in the party, simply because she was doing interesting actions that were against her instinct, and she just had a lot of fun. She was like, man, this is great. All these repressed feelings of sassiness and malice. she had a lot of fun with that.
Now, I'm just kind of envisioning a little bit of you going, wait a minute, who did I marry here?
Yes.
As it starts to come out, like, I better watch myself. So there is a question in here I want to address. Cole Martin, how should you weigh the opinions of popular DMs? Many of them are credible, but have conflicting opinions. Flight is lovely. Flight is OP, that sort of thing. So, I mean, just as an example. So I'll start and then I'll kick it to you, Grant.
Sure.
So here's the thing. As far as I'm concerned, the only GM that actually really matters is the one that is at the table with you, whether that is you or the person running the game. You know, respect them and play the game that they're running within reason. And, you know, you don't let other people define your fun. If every, talking head GM out there, Nerdarchy included, tells you this is the wrong way to do it, and it's a good times for everyone, who cares? Just play your game.
Yeah, and going right along with that, you hit it perfectly spot on. The most important dungeon master, game master in the world is the one who is sitting at the table that you are playing at, even if it's yourself. And take it a piece of advice from Bruce Lee: study everything and keep what works, and be willing to maybe try different tools at different time if they feel right. You know, there might be a campaign where you feel the flight spell is overpowered for that campaign that you're running. If you're running the Tomb of Horrors and you have a character that has the Dungeon Delver feat from 5th edition, that feat is going to be overpowered for the Tomb of Horrors. It's not going, the adventure will not function the way that it was intended to run. So that might be something that you restrict from that particular adventure session or campaign, or you'll come up with a fictional reason why that feat wouldn't work. But the wonderful thing about Dungeons and Dragons is all the popular dungeon masters or game masters could talk about it forever, and they will change their opinion from time to time. They'll adapt. If Matt Colville said something 3 years ago, he might not agree with what he said 3 years ago today. If Matt Mercer said something last week, he might not feel that way this week. And the other thing is, they're all willing to listen to your opinions. Your opinion is as valid as the popular dungeon masters online. Never forget that. I've learned how to run role-playing games from 17-year-olds that just made it up as they went. There's a kid in our neighborhood who can't afford the rule book, so he wrote his own 200-page rule book, reverse engineering role-playing games by watching people play them online. And he runs a great campaign, has nothing to do with any published material. I sent Chris Perkins a picture of this kid's 200-page binder with my cell phone, and that kid suddenly sees he's trending on Twitter with his homemade rules. He's like, whoa, I'm just running games for friends, because that's all we're doing here. We're just having fun running games with friends.
So it's all about, man. Fluid Imp. With the release of Xanthar's Guide, is stuff like the Raven Queen Warlock from UA something we can still use? Do you think it will show up again later? So with questions like this, it always comes down to, where are you playing, right? Are you playing at home with your friends? You can do whatever the frig you want. Or maybe guys in suits will show up and be like, you can't do this. Nah, it's
There's a knock on the door. Jeremy Crawford.
It always makes me think of the episode of The Simpsons when the Homer starts an online business from home, and Bill Gates shows up to buy him out, and he's like so excited, you know, and then he shows up with a couple of goons, and they just start wrecking his living room, and he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I didn't get rich writing checks."
Oh my goodness, yeah. Honestly, just the way it works is just talk to your game master. Talk to whoever's running the game and see if it's acceptable. And hey, if you want to retcon your character and use something new that's come out or keep something old, just talk to your game master. I mean, the guys with suits might show up, but you got to roll on those percentile dice to see if they do, and often they don't.
Yeah, may the luck of the die be with you. You know, when I run my own games, like we do fan games every month, and I'm like, I don't care, play whatever you want. You all want to be lore wizards, go for it. So
yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think some of the most fun sessions are when it's like we're going to be a cabal of wizards, and we're building ourselves these ways. I want to play a dwarven ranger criminal who wields a great club. To heck with min-maxing. I've got an 18 strength, and I've got a club.
So Andy wants to know, I don't actually know the question. I would actually have to look this up and see what the wording is. Like, I love the sage advice with Jeremy Crawford is always like half the time it means what it says it means. or read the freaking book, man.
I'm paid. Yeah. Explicitly means explicitly.
Yeah. You know, he's just had one too many sage advices that day. And he's just like, guys.
Yeah, we're blessed to live in an age, and I think it kind of goes back to when Gary Gygax's phone number was listed in the phone book and people would call him up and ask him for a ruling. And Gary would often respond, well, how did you handle it and what would you do? Because I'm interested in how you would run Dungeons & Dragons at your table. So our designers of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at Wizards of the Coast are very available. And you can tell, though, when they've kind of crossed that line and had made themselves a little too available that day, and they're like, the book says what it says.
Yeah. So to answer your question, though, like if it says it's a weapon attack and, you know, Green Flame Blade, if it says make a weapon attack, then I would say they would work together. And also, too, whatever, like even if it doesn't work together and your GM will allow it, like ask them, can I do this?
Yep.
And they'll be like, that's badass. Go for it. You know, whatever.
Yeah. And there's a whole section on improvising actions in the 5th edition rulebook, you know, in the player's handbook. It says, look, let players improvise. There might not be a hard rule here. Let them try something.
We were at Gen Con and totally botched a rule. Like I dug later on, like sage advice, then they actually answered it. But one of the characters had, man, what was this? I think heroism gives you temporary hit points every round. Had that cast on them, and they're the barbarian. And then they went down. But every round you get temporary hit points. So technically, you can't get temporary hit points if you're unconscious, apparently. But we didn't know what the rule was, and I'm a kind of GM that I'd rather just roll with it, and I usually just favor the PCs when I make a rolling on the fly. So I was like, sure, that's fine. Every round you have 3 hit points. So he would just keep getting knocked down, and every round he would get up because he had 3 temporary hit points, and nice. Like Undertaker style. And it was like during the game, it was so much more fun than saying no, it doesn't work.
And talking about it afterwards, it makes this like dramatic no-sell pro wrestling style story where the guy just keeps getting up. And that session's unique in Dungeons and Dragons, and everyone had fun. So it followed the rule of cool. And, you know, that's a fun way to do it. And I know there's probably someone in chat that says, but the rules are there for a reason. Yeah, that's fine.
You know, there's a little bit. Right. I feel like we have 5th edition, right? Because 3rd edition fucked the rules so hard. Like, there was a rule for everything. So, like, as a GM, you know, you're handcuffed. Like, especially even the players that knew all the rules. You know, it really defined what you could and couldn't do. And it took 5th edition coming out for me to really understand what I missed about 1st and 2nd edition.
Yeah, 5th edition. I tried to play 3rd edition once, and it was a horrible experience. I played a bit of second edition and first edition, and some of the Beckme, but yeah, I miss kind of versions where there's not really a lot of mechanics around things. There's less mechanics around role playing and what I would call implied actions. You know, there's no use rope skill where you have to sit there for 3 hours of game time trying to tie a knot. You just say, I tie the knot, you know. Clever dungeon master would say, what type of knot do you tie? Just to test the player, you know. Or to teach the thing.
Yeah.
Are you tying it to an anchor? Or is it a hitch? Is it a lashing? You know, just there's some fun there. But yeah, I like I liked second edition a whole lot. That's my first introduction to Dungeons and Dragons. I was 12, and I wanted to run D&D. I bought the Dungeon Master's Guide to second edition, not the Player's Handbook. But what a great book to just get flavor. I mean, I didn't have rules to run a game, but I understood a lot about this is what this game is. But then I was so disappointed because being 11 years old with no money, it's like, well, I can't play this game because I have no rules. But I have a book that teaches me about paladins and thieves and why there can't be an assassin class in second edition and things like that.
Yeah, that is one of the cool things that you hear oftentimes is people who picked up the books but never played. They just wanted to have the books either for the art or or because it inspired their imagination or or they wanted to have more of the books and they were just too broke to get them.
Yes.
as the case may be.
Yeah, I grew up playing Weston Games D6 Star Wars, so that was my first role-playing game. And I played for years and years and years and years, but I always wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons because when I was a kid, there was a cartoon on TV, and some people go, boo, it's horrible. I was like, you don't understand. At like age 3 and age 4, seeing these kids, magical adventures, and they have armor and they have cool weapons and they're questing. To me, it was just the coolest thing. And I always wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. I got Heroes Quest for my 9th birthday. And I still wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. My parents sat me down and they were like, well, there's stories of kids who, this is my dad, took these games too seriously. And, you might start wearing a loincloth, traveling the cities, swinging a sledgehammer, calling yourself Hrothgar the Destroyer. I don't want that to happen to you, son. Yeah, it didn't happen. At least not till I was 19.
So when he's telling you that story, where you're like, oh my God, I can do that?
Yeah, I was so like, amazing. Sweet! No one will mess with me! I'm going to bust so many kneecaps!
Oh my God, that would be hilarious. Oh man. D&D. Yeah. So there was a question. Web editor Doug grabbed it. I don't know who the original viewer was, but been playing D&D for a while, but can't seem to find the right story to keep interest of players. Advice, please.
All right. I treat Dungeons and Dragons as a game, and the story is what the players tell afterwards. It seems like to me what you might have is too many. You need to narrow the focus of your world and think of a sandbox, then think of a bucket within a sandbox. Fill up that bucket with a couple of interesting ideas. Just write down 3 interesting ideas, and I'll improv 3 ideas right now. One is that the army to the south is conscripting every adult and teenage male into the army. And their army is just marching up and down through your campaign world, and they're just conscripting all the men. And we don't know why. The second is that there's a town nearby where the only inhabitants are dwarf wizards who are polygamous, and they only marry half-orc women. And the third is a wizard, a necromancer, has taken over the tallest mountain in the world, to summon the 7 angels of the apocalypse. And then just give them a strong verb where it might be they must go to the town and tell the mayor that he is needed to go to the tall mountain and deal with the necromancer. So the adventure starts. You arrive at the town. You're going to be introduced to a strange culture, and also look at things like the players' backgrounds tie in their backgrounds. You know, if they were a charlatan, maybe there's someone in the town that they had wronged before. Make it about the players. You know, find deep hooks. It's not so much the story, because I think the story is arbitrary. I know this is kind of a long tangent, but managing the subject is what cliche is if you're just managing the subject. But if you manage the overtones, and by that I mean the way the players feel when they're playing the game, that's where the art is, in managing overtones. So it's not so much the story, it's about making a game and just finding ways to hook in the players and make it about them. And a good way to do that is with a strong verb. Do a specific thing. Find this person at this location. And then the second thing is give them some options that just sound really, really cool. Make it fantastic and personal. So that's some just basic advice. I just improved all that off the top of my head, but it's like you can do whatever you want, and understand that while that's a very big thing, just think about things that interest your character. Are they interested in establishing a cult? Are they interested in slaying a dragon? Let them live exciting lives through role-playing games.
You're always going to fall short if you're trying to provide the story. You know, the best thing is to find hooks, like you said, the deep hooks that the players have already put out there, and just regurgitate them. Matter of fact, they don't even notice it most of the time when you do that. They just know that it relates to their character. And never once have I been accused of, you stole that from my backstory. It's just like, oh no, this involves me, and they know because they said it, and it makes them immersed in the world, and makes them feel like, you know, they're a part of something greater. So it becomes really easy. Now, even better though is if you can do a session 0 and connect your players together, and then it's so much easier, because if you hook one, you hook them all. You know, pretty much. Instead of doing what I used to do, such an asshole, was I would have them all make up their character, show up to the table, and then I would have to figure out how to put them all together and do all this extra work. And at the end of the day, you know, there's been sessions where I've seen DMs who would just do that same thing. And if they weren't that good at it, you might have one player that sat at the table and didn't play all night, or waited hours to finally get into the action. And you know, never again will I do that. I don't care how hokey a thing I have to do to get everyone playing the same game at the same time. I do it because I see no benefit in sitting there and watching other people play the game. And we're playing a game. We may tell stories with this game, but we're not writing a novel. Like, you're a writer, you write, right? Mm-hmm. But that's different. That's you writing by yourself. You know, and you get some gamers and some DMs are so pretentious about this game we play. I was like, come on, dude, get over it.
No, we're pushing lead, we're rolling dice, we're killing monsters, and we're finding treasure. That's literally what we're doing here. They go, but the story and the thing, I was like, we're killing monsters and we're finding treasure. That's essentially what we're doing when we play Dungeons and Dragons. Its roots are in a war game, and the story is what you tell afterwards, though. It's like I said, it's like you do these really fun things, and then if you don't have the time for a session 0, like I never have the time for a session 0, that doesn't mean I don't use session 0 techniques. What I might do is I'll message each player online, or I'll call them if it's at my in-person game and say, hey, I want to talk about a secret your character has in this campaign. A secret? Yeah, something that only they know that's unique about them, that's tied into the campaign world. So I send them a primer for the campaign setting. That's kind of the call to action. And then we talk about what would make their character really special and interesting in this campaign. Sometimes that secret comes into play, sometimes it doesn't. But the players really love the idea of that I took the time to make them feel special and part of the game, but it also helps guide their actions.
So I want to jump in the roll call, guys. Sound off where you're coming from, and I'll babble a little bit while you guys get started. So I did shotgun a little Commander Kaiju this morning.
I think I started writing it around page 9. Yeah. So how's that going?
Good. I mean, come on, giant monsters. I'm all about it. The piece that I saw was really short, so I'm like, I don't know where it's going to go. Who's going to fight the giant monsters? That guy.
Yeah, that's when the robots show up, and it's funny how that came in, because Sam Sam is the most creative person I know. His mind goes a mile a minute. He just got hired by Konami to be a senior character designer. And, he's launched big TV series like Archer on FX and, just a really creative guy. But he's like, I just want to do cool monsters and cool robots and, epic fights. That's what I want to do. And as a writer, when you work with an artist like Sam, you can learn a lot by watching Penny Arcade, the series, and watching the way Jerry Holkins and Mike Krahulik work together. Jerry's the writer, but he sits a lot and he listens to Mike just talk about interesting ideas. When you work with an artist like Sam Ellis, you kind of have to sit there and just let Sam talk about things that are interesting to him to get him really motivated to illustrate. Because if the artist isn't creating art, you're not going to have a comic book. You might have a short story that's written word, but you've got to find something that's interesting and exciting for them to write. And then the other rule to that is something Jerry says, where we made the best comic we could make on that day. It's not always going to be dynamite. It's not always going to be exciting. With Commander Kaiju, you do roughly a page a week. You sit down and you have your overarching plot, but you just make the best comic you can make that day. It won't always be great, but it'll be a lot of fun doing it. I mean, shoot, giant monsters, giant robots, comics, it's fun.
I really enjoyed the format. Just the way it works in the Google Slides.
Yeah.
I'm easy to please though. So I would make the worst critic. Everything that's terrible, people say is terrible, I like. So
yeah, and that's one of my favorite movies is Masters of the Universe. Essentially like the 80s He-Man movie with Dolph Lundgren. It's like my favorite movie, and people are like, but it's so bad. I was like, it's the most watchable bad movie in the world though. They kept Dolph's lines very short and he doesn't have that many. He just says things like, I won't hurt you and I have the power. What a fun movie.
I liked his Punisher.
Yeah.
Another one that people say is terrible. I also really love the Pacific Rim. I can't wait for the second one.
I love Pacific Rim. and my friends, Dave Silva was the toy designer at NECA. And, Pacific Rim is one of the reasons we made Commander Kaiju, just because we're like, man, this has everything that I like. It has all these tropes that I like. I got so much hate, especially with my background in filmmaking and things like that. They're like, dude, you're like the snobbish, guy. Why do you like Pacific Rim? I was like, because it's so much fun. Look how cool everything looks. This looks amazing.
Giant monsters, giant robots. What else do you need?
Yeah.
And they fight. It doesn't get any better than that.
No, not at all.
So we got Doug weighing in from Cleveland, our nerd editor. We've got SLC Utah in the house with Vamp Jager. Sweden with Patrick. Kyle is in British Columbia. Kuwait in the house with Poison. Jack McLeod is in the Exeter, Ontario, Canada. We got Radizio, New Mexico with Zarif Gaming. Mike is in Maryland. Norfolk, Virginia in the house with Charles. Adam is in Indianapolis. Tampa, Florida with Jose Suarez. Greg is in Ontario. We got Montana with Tucker. We've got Oklahoma City with Oklahoma with Trey. We got Albuquerque, New Mexico in the house with Tech Scarwing. We've got Lynn, Massachusetts with Dan Sorrell. Lynn, Massachusetts with Comrade 2261. We got Bardstown, Kentucky with Dan. Sorry. Fort Lauderdale, Florida with Sean. We got Chicago in the house with Joe. And we've got Exy in Texas. We got Roll for Damage is in Louisiana. Washington in the house with Frigginator. Dallas with Ed Does Everything. We got North Carolina in the house with DeMark. We've got, all right, so now we're jumping all over the place. This happens all the time. When we start we start talking, they go off on whatever we're talking about and come out of the roll call. But I want to thank you guys for weighing in from all over the place. Greatly appreciate it. And we're sitting at like over 90 people hanging out with us today. So we might get a little higher number today with it being the day after the holiday.
Yeah, they heard it was me and that hurt your viewership today. They're like, no, F that guy. They're like, that fat-faced Virginian. They're like...
Oh man, are you saying that no love for Virginia?
It's not that there's no love for Virginia. It's my fat face. They're sick of it showing up on all these channels and live streams and actual plays. So no, thank you for showing up, chat. You're the true believers. Appreciate all the support and the participation.
Actually, you had a pretty cool story about. Actually, you have a lot of pretty cool stories, really. But we were talking earlier about how you started actually streaming with Encounter Roleplay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was spending the past 2 years just running Dungeons and Dragons at gaming conventions, and over the past 2 years, I've run for over 115 unique players now, just at gaming conventions. All kinds of people coming up, sitting at the table, and playing with me. And Will from Encounter Roleplay was supposed to be a guest at GexCon, and I was actually the special guest that vetted his legitimacy, and I was contacted by the president of the convention, and I was like, oh yeah, he's totally legit, but isn't he in England? They said he'll be in the States, but he couldn't get his visa, so they wanted me to salvage the D&D panel, and the host of the convention, Laura Lania, Tia Zimmer, really enjoyed playing Dungeons and Dragons with me at the convention. She really enjoyed our D&D panel, and she messaged Will and said, you should probably have this guy on. And Will hit me up and was like, hey, I want you to play in a game or run a game sometime. And I pitched him on 2 different campaigns. One was a 5th edition update of the 2nd edition super module. Excuse me, we'll hold it up in front of the camera, Night Below. And we were going to set it in Icewind Dale and call it The Winter Below. And the other idea, I said, I'm also working on 3 books right now, and we can run all original content that will be exclusive to your channel as far as the actual play. And he was into it. He said, let's do the original content. And so I've run 2 campaigns for Will, may do a 3rd. I really appreciate his community. They're a lot of fun. They're just very passionate about games. They open the table to everyone. They run community games, and they're just the nicest people.
Sweet. And now you're a streamer.
Yeah, I do a lot of streaming. In fact, before I got on Encounter Roleplay, actually a lot of my original material I would write on stream. I would do a show I called The Other Side of the Screen, where I would just show people how I design an adventure from scratch. People would get on, and they'd watch me design an adventure from the maps. I'd show them the different Jacquet techniques, which refers to Janelle Jacquet, the famous dungeon designer. You can go way back to the advent of Dungeons & Dragons to find the Jacquet maps. And I'd show them just how in Microsoft Excel you can make a perfectly usable dungeon using these techniques. And then the night after that, I would run what's called D&D Open Mic Night, where I would just go into random Discords, random post on Twitter, just get a random group of players, and we would run brand new material that I wrote the night before. And just, we're going to play Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to play for 90 minutes. At the end of this, I'd like your feedback because I have books I'm trying to write and publish. And without having a large pool of play testers, the online community is essentially my play testers. So it's always fun to do the D&D open mic nights. And yeah, I've been doing streaming since about 2012. I'm really sporadic with it, largely because when I do stream, I like to put my creative energy into where it's most useful. And right now it's helping out the more established streamers coming on and helping make sure they have content, because that's how they pay their bills, right? So it's like they stream on Twitch 40 to 80 hours a week, and they're completely rely on donations, subscriptions, Patreon. And so I like to share the content I have with them, since they're kind of the lifeblood of the current paradigm. I think an article came out recently that 50% of new Dungeons & Dragons players came from watching actual play streams such as Critical Role or Acquisitions Inc. So I like to help the streaming community out. They're good people for the most part.
It's well, the streaming in D&D, this is like the golden age of gaming. Although I guess I was told by an industry person that the numbers are, we're about 1/3 to 1/4 of where we were in the 80s for gaming, but it seems so much bigger.
Yes, because of social media, it's so accessible, right? We hear about it all the time. We might not have the actual numbers, but we have heightened awareness. I mean, they're talking about Dungeons and Dragons on the Emmys. You know, that Xanathar's Guide is currently like the #6 selling book on Amazon. So we may not have the numbers that we had in the 80s, but we definitely have probably the heightened awareness.
Well, I feel like too now in this, in 2017, there's so much more competition for people's free time. So I think that's the real battle. But I think with things like Critical Role and streaming, and it's so much more accessible than it's ever been, we're definitely, I think we're back on the rise, and I think we can destroy that number eventually.
Yeah, we're. And I think the game's being very much demystified. You know, it's not a cult activity performed by Satanists to murder Tom Hanks or something like that. It's essentially, they're like, look, this is good, clean fun. Even at my table, it's like, look, this is a social activity. You're having conversations, and you're exploring interesting themes that involve relationships, involve society, involve adventure, and you can live out an extraordinary life through pen and paper or through digital means if you want. And really, we're just having fun and playing games. And so I think to smashing the record numbers, we'll get there. We'll get there.
So Zareth Gaming, how would you deal with a silly player in an otherwise serious group?
I'd cut off their nose. Say, "How are you laughing now, funny man? You look pretty funny with no nose," and then I'd feed it to my dog. No, I wouldn't do that. I'd talk to them about it, and I'd also talk to the other players, because what if the other players don't mind that they're silly? If I minded personally, I'd talk with them about it and let them know that some games have a little more lightheartedness, but I've played in a lot of quote serious games where there's strict rules on no Monty Python references. An hour into it, there's Monty Python references, and everyone's laughing. Oh my goodness, we're having so much fun. Role-playing can be serious business, but it's also just a game, and people play games to have fun. So just talk to the player and find out why they behave in the way they do. And also talk to the other players, because if it's not bothering any of the other players, is there really an issue? And it also might be that player... Find out more about them as a person. Like me, I have really bad social anxiety that wasn't diagnosed until this year. I was diagnosed with PTSD, agoraphobia, severe social anxiety disorder. And sometimes I would act out in social situations where I would just start making frantic jokes that people felt were funny, but maybe out of place. They're like, why is he making a joke while we're passing the sacrament at church? Now, it just kind of felt like that. It's like... but find out about the person. It may just be that humor is how they diffuse a uncomfortable situation. That's kind of the advice I would do. Talk about it as people outside of the table, and then introduce that into the table. Now, if everyone's having a bad time because the guy's breaking the social contract of gaming at your table, let them know that there's a time and a place, and that particular game is not the time nor the place. But there will be one that is.
There may be ways to work it into the game if you discuss it with them and talk to them. Like, I mean, in the Saver Dice game was very serious, and we're playing, the first one that Jim Davis ran, and I played the silly character, but I developed a character around a certain way, and I stayed true to that character, but it was still silly because he was kind of like juvenile and mentally underdeveloped, and it just worked with the dynamic of the group. Now, had it been disruptive and off camera, I would say I've talked to people, go, hey, is this too much? Do I need to dial it back? And it's really just about having conversations and talking to people. I guess one of the tough parts can be too is in our community we have people that can be a little bit awkward, and they don't know. They don't know
in this community. In this community? Yeah. No, never.
And they don't know it. So, maybe it can be fixed with a conversation,
Yeah, and also look at a movie like Braveheart, and the King of Ireland oftentimes is a somewhat comedic character. Look at Alfred Hitchcock movies and how humor is used to break tension. And watch movies, watch old war movies, watch World War II movies, where every now and then you have someone who tries to break a very uncomfortable situation. Delve a little deeper. delve a little deeper. Now, if it's just stick and fart jokes, I get that. You know, that might be off-putting, but if they're somewhat silly, maybe there's a reason why they behave that way. It's like you said, you know, you had a character who was worked into their character. And oftentimes with me, it's like, you know, I draw from my personal life. I'm kind of a silly guy, but that's because I suffered severe scarring trauma. It's kind of like, you know, play the buffoon because you need to be happy for the world, even if it's not necessarily appropriate in that situation. So delve a little deeper and maybe find a way to make it work. Or maybe find a situation that will serious up the player, have the player go through a change that helps make them more serious. But that's the dungeon master's job, to provide that opportunity. It may not happen on their own.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One, can you channel that silly energy into your serious game to improve the experience overall? And two, can you as the GM challenge those players with role-playing situations that is going to make the character have growth during it, which would be an amazing thing to happen in your game as well. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And third, just you just have to have a conversation and see what's going on. Maybe they just need a buddy to talk to.
Absolutely.
So, Lady Firelight, would you tell a player unsolicited that you hate their character?
We hate their character? Can you repeat that?
Here's my thing. Unless your character is openly disruptive to the game in some way, I really don't give an F what other people do with their characters. Like, I hate when other people tell people how to play their characters.
Oh, I hate that so much. So much backseat. No, you're doing it wrong. It's like, dude, F off. Let me play my character. You're familiar with Knights at the Dinner Table, right?
Yes, but it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, same for me. I come and I go, but that's really kind of how I was socialized into role-playing games. I was playing with Dave Kinzer at Gen Con, where he's like, you're really not making the most optimal decision. This is Dave Kinzer, owner of Kinzer Co. I'm playing Hackmaster with Jolly R. Blackburn there, and I just go, okay, are you done telling me how to run my character? I'm the one playing the game. I understand it's your life to try to sell this game, but I'm the one playing it. Are you going to let me run my character? And he just got quiet for a second. I was like, good. Now I'm going to waste my action, as you said I would do. I'm going to set this zombie on fire because that's what my character would do. Bam! And like, Jolly starts cracking up because he's like, man, he's like someone out of my books. So I'm like, yeah, I've read them all. So I was like, look, play role-playing games, having fun. But, and obviously I was more respectful to him afterwards. They said, look, I was just playing a part at the table, and I get what you were doing there. And you just wanted me to play the game a little more efficiently to have more fun. But, yeah, I hate people telling people how to run the character. It's just a game. Let people play the game.
Now, we've been guilty of this. I've been the asshole. We had one player that was playing a wizard, and at one point we turned to him and said, "You do not cast a spell without consulting someone first." Now, I've matured a little bit since then. We've grown a bit. We've kicked GMs out of the seat in the middle of their session.
The hardcore gamers at Nerdarchy. It's like, look.
We've
get the mini off the table. There's the door.
Oh my god! We still
take a hike and don't forget the trail mix. Man,
and we kind of joke about it too because they were running a module and they read the PCC. We were hard in our youth. We were freaking horrible. Like, you guys, if you're growing up now, you're so lucky you did not game in like the 80s. It was a bad time.
My first session, I was running for a group of 17-year-olds. I was 11 years old, and we did really fine till we got to combat. My older brother was like, you don't know the rules. And I start like shaking. He was like, out, go home, read the rules on combat, read them 7 times, and then you come back here and you finish running the role-play game. And I was just like, I go home crying. I'm reading the book with tears in my eyes. He finds me. He goes, reading the rules of combat. He goes, how many times have you read them? I was like, 4 times. He was like, then get back there and start running the game. I was like, but you said 7. And he's like, you know the rules now, right? I'm like, yeah. And he was like, run the role-playing game. We're waiting for you. Come on. Mom's going to get home. That was my introduction to role-playing games. And it's like, look, it was a different time. It was a different culture. And, I tell people, made me stronger, made me a better player. And, some people, they get Do you feel, here's a question for you. Do you feel people take offense if there's like what we'll call a rules argument at the table? But that was like part of the culture back in the day. It's like, look, we argue about the rules, dude, because nobody understands them. There's no actual play to watch. You can't watch Chris Perkins run for a group of people 3 times a week. You can't watch Matt Mercer run for 4 hours. The rules aren't written as cleanly as, say, like a Ben Robbins book. So you'd argue about the rules. And nowadays people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. I think we all need to take a time out. I understand you don't want to waste a bunch of time at the table arguing about a rule, but it's like, that was like a cultural thing. And when my we'll call them older friends, you know, people in their 50s who have played role-playing games for 40 years now, they still like to have rule debates at the table because that's what they did when they were kids. And they're like, this is part of the game. This is part of the game.
Yeah, I definitely feel that is one of the things that definitely went on. We've had all kinds of crazy stuff. We had someone's dentures. We didn't know they had a top plate until they flew out and landed in the center of the table. There's an accusation that Nerdarchy fed poison Kit Kats back in the day to people, which, you know, that's only partially true. You know, we've had someone smash their die with a sledgehammer at the table. We had someone put someone in a headlock. Like, these are the kind of things that would kind of happen sometimes.
Oh my goodness.
There was a Halloween where we had Halloween like Kit Kats. You know, the half a Kit Kat, right? So we would use them for our terrain. We'd make the dungeon walls out of them, and we would use D4s for the adventurers and die-6s for the monsters.
Yeah.
Well, we'd get a new player every once in a while, and they'd be like, "Oh, Kit Kat, I like those. Can I have one?" And we're like, "Sure." We didn't tell them they'd been there from 5 Halloweens ago, but
it's like, sure.
Like, that's why the fire from Lady Firelight, your question was a little tough. Is like, would you tell someone you'd hate their character? Like, I don't know. We were kind of dicks back in the day. So.
You know, I might tell someone that I hate their character, but I might tell them what I don't like about them. I might tell them what I don't like about them. It might be that you know, I have a friend. He's actually a good friend. He's a little younger than us. His dad is my dungeon master, and I was this kid's dungeon master. But, you know, he's one of those kids that might want to retcon his character, who they were. And, like, he'd read the adventure after we ran the adventure, and then he'd be like, well, I want to change my stats and my spells. And I'm giving myself some magic items from this adventure. And, like, he texted me. He's like, oh, by the way, my character gets this ring of protection. I was like, we didn't find a ring of protection in the campaign. He goes, no, we found it in the owlbear cave. I was like, we didn't go to the owlbear cave. Hold on. Someone's reading the books, and they're adding things to their character sheets. I let him know. It's just like, look, this character lived a life. Don't disrespect your character's life just because he didn't do all the things you wanted him to do. Like, we played together. We adventured together. Don't disrespect the game by doing that. And some people might say, man, Grant, you take Dungeons and Dragons way too seriously. But I was like, I just want him to be honest with himself. And he said that actually helped him as a person. He said, yeah, you know, I kind of got what you were saying there. I just had an image for my character, and I realized I can just make a new character, give him whatever the hell I want. It was like, who's going to stop me? Who's going to question it? I was like, no one. That's just it. So you're free. You're free to cheat. Just don't do it at my table.
Yeah, I guess I was reading on your website, like the rules for, maybe it was for the Death House game, and like how you did the characters, like they had to roll them in pairs, or pair of players, or use a pre-gen or whatever. But I instantly started thinking, but what if both the players cheat?
I think they did that game. They came in there with like 5 20s between them. And here's the thing about me. I really don't care about ability scores. I kind of have a reputation for being one of the hardest hitting dungeon masters. In fact, I hold the record on encounter roleplay for most knockdowns of characters and most damage dealt. No one's died on stream yet, but they sure as heck have come close. And even last night when I ran improv D&D, and it was simply 4 goblins, 2 PCs, and they're guarding pigs in a pig pen, when a player fell and was making multiple death saving throws. I like to hit very hard as a dungeon master. I'm like, oh, you cheated on your stats, eh? Or no, you rolled 5 20s. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, right? Because I'm like, look, if I need to hit a little harder, I'll hit a little harder. If I need to up the challenge, I can up the challenge. not going to cheat. I like to roll my dice in the open, and I'll let them fall where they may. With that said, players, it brings the best out of them. I can't kill them. It's 5th edition. Nobody dies. Nobody dies in 5th edition, or if they do, it's very rare.
We've had a run of deaths lately.
Yes, I think it's comeback. Deaths have made a comeback in 5th edition. I think now, after the game being out for 3 years, deaths are a thing. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I want to bring the best out of the players. I want a challenging combat. My fear is when I run a challenging combat, and then it just taxes them mentally that they forget to check for traps, and then they all drop because of a poison trap that they didn't think to look for. Like, they survive the hard combat, and then it's just like, oh shoot, he broke us down, just mentally throwing puzzles and combats at us, and then we just forgot to check for traps, and clearly there would be a trap there. It was just a pressure plate. We didn't think to check, we didn't think to take a short rest.
I think in our 5th edition career, we're going on like 10 character deaths. Something like that. So, I mean, it's over like 3-4 years.
3 years, yeah. And I think that's great. And character turnover is a wonderful thing, too, because you always have new supplements coming out. You always have new options coming out. Character turnover is part of the game. And it's great to, have characters pass on and remember them and, tell stories about them. And play new characters, too. You have other stories to tell. I think in 2.5 years, we had 3. We had 3 character deaths. The current campaign I'm in right now as a player, we've had 4 out of 9 characters, but that's a year-long campaign. That's an old-school dungeon master who lets the dice fall where they may.
Yeah, you did what I do as well, or you said you did what I do, and I like to roll the dice in the open. It is what it is, occasionally I would be like, should I pull punches? And I'm like, nah. I ran a one shot down in your neck of the woods for Think Geek, actually.
Yeah, I know those guys.
And I was at the final encounter, and I was like, man, they were going up against a Minotaur and a Mecha Minotaur. It was just a shield guardian, but he was dubbed the Mecha Minotaur. And I was like, man, this is a really tough encounter. And they were splitting their attacks, and their tactics weren't the greatest. And I was like, oh man, oh well, we'll see what happens.
Here's my question for you too. It's like, do you think the players are going to pull their punches? Like, is anyone going? The other players at the table, are they going to pull back? Are they going to say no? I mean, they might say, I knocked this thing unconscious, so I can question them later. But do you think they're playing not to kill monsters and find treasure? They deserve a challenging adventure where there's the threat of defeat. They deserve to be able to tell an epic tale. I mean, you're not going to hand these guys a football and say, there's no opposing team, or we put you up against a class of kindergartners. It's like, you want there to be some drama, and that drama's in that conflict. And, I think a lot of times as dungeon masters, we talk a big game, but we're also big fans of the players. We want them to succeed, but we also want them to earn it and have fun and watch those dice. It's like, look, I'm sorry I rolled a nat 20 and killed your character, but it sure was a funny thing.
My partner, Ted, who I believe is the one you met at PAX Unplugged, oh my God, he got so mad because they were fighting this like Myconid vampire lich thing. And he was the cleric hitting it with radiant damage, keeping it from healing. So once it finally dropped him, it came over and just stomped on him. Gave him 2 instant death saves. He was so mad. Now, he didn't die in that encounter. He did not die in that encounter. He only stomped once. But I was like, yeah, he's probably really pissed off.
That happened last night. Terminally Nerdy, he was fighting someone in a tree. He got knocked unconscious in the tree, then fell from the tree. And when he hit the ground, took 2 death saves. He was like, dang it. It was so fun. I was like, well, you
that next die roll he's got to make is so exciting now, though, right?
Yeah, Power Score was like, I want to keep fighting the goblins, but now I've got to go stabilize them. And he ran over to stabilize them, got a nat 20, and I was like, he's given this halfling monk compressions. The guy's eyes open, and they flee the woods. And they were like, it was dramatic. It goes back to that idea of manage the overtones. That's the drama. The drama is in you've created this epic situation.
And that our first character death was failed death save. One of the characters tries to do a medicine check, fails his medicine save. Next death save, nat 1. Bang! That was our first death.
Yeah, dramatic too. It's like, oof, that's when it happens. Ours in my Storm King's Thunder campaign was the freaking homebrewed Blue Goblin Psionic Awakened Mystic that was like untouchable the whole campaign. When we finally killed him, and I know Russell's probably watching this stream, when he finally died, but he had a wish spell that like, if I die, I will. I mean, I think Mike Merle's commented on this wish. I posted on Reddit because I wanted advice how to handle it, and they're like, "This is going to be crazy." But he eventually resurrected 3,000 miles away in a temple of a different god. He was an agnostic character, so he had to choose a god in the afterlife. He now had religious commitments for the rest of his days, but he thought it was awesome. He was like, "Man, I finally died. You finally killed me." And then I went on this whole new adventure in the city-state of the Invincible Overlord, not even part of this world, and had a heck of a time getting back to the party. That's D&D, man. That's fun.
That's D&D, brother. That's a quote to live by. That's D&D.
That's D&D, brother.
With that, we were right up on the hour mark, man. If you want some parting words where people can find you, I got a bunch of links in the descriptions, guys. You can check that out.
All right, the best place to find me is at WisePapaGrant on Twitter. You can find some of my work on Just Comics Group. Hit me up on Encounter Roleplay on Twitch. I run a game every Wednesday afternoon at 4:30 called the Court of the Elves. We have players like James Hake, who helped Matt Mercer write the Tal'Dorei campaign guide. We have some great things coming up in that campaign. And if you enjoy sword and sorcery and courtly intrigue, it's one to watch.
Sweet. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us, and thanks for being on, Grant. Greatly appreciate it. We're going to have you back on because we did not even talk about PST D&D either. So we'll have to have you back on and talk about that because that's a great thing that you're doing for veterans.
Absolutely, and I'd love to talk about it. Support the troops, everyone. Support those that have served. Support everyone in the community, even if you don't like them. And it's okay if you don't like some people in this community. Just treat them nice.
More words to live by. Until next time, guys, stay nerdy.
Peace.